When I saw her post holding a puppy named after our unborn baby, I froze. My husband gave our baby's name to their dog after telling her I was too controlling to let him choose it, he said. This one listens better anyway. When I confronted him, he mocked, "You're jealous of a dog." So I sent the clip to her parents along with. When I saw the Instagram post, I stopped breathing. There she was, the woman my husband swore was just a friend from work, sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding a golden retriever puppy with a bright blue collar and a name tag that read Eli. That name. Our baby's name. The one we'd chosen months before the miscarriage. The name he whispered to my belly every night. The name I couldn't even say out loud anymore without feeling like I was being stabbed from the inside. Her caption said, "Welcome to the family, Eli. You already have daddy wrapped around your paw," and the comments, God, the comments. OMG, so cute. Eli is perfect. And then his comment, right there in public for everyone to see. This one listens better than the last Eli. I read that line over and over. My fingers went numb. The last Eli. Like our child was a trial run, a mistake he could just replace with a dog. I didn't even realize I'd started shaking until my phone slipped out of my hand and clattered on the kitchen counter. When he came home that night, smelling like beer and cheap cologne, I showed him the post. I didn't yell. I just turned my phone around and said, "What is this?" He laughed, actually laughed. "Babe, you're jealous of a dog," he said, like I was insane. Then quieter with that smirk he gets when he wants to make me feel small. "Relax. At least this one won't cry when I leave the room." That's when something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was colder than that. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who used to cry in our hospital room when the doctor said the heartbeat was gone, and realized that person was dead too. I didn't scream, I didn't throw anything. I just nodded slowly and said, "You're right, it's just a dog." He smirked again, proud of himself, and went to shower. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the dim light of the phone's screen. I clicked share post, typed a message, and sent it directly to her parents, the same ones who had commented, "So happy for you too," underneath her picture. And along with that post, I attached something else. Something that would make them see exactly who their daughter was sleeping with, and who she'd stolen him from. But before that, I should tell you how we got here. Because this didn't start with a puppy. I met Luke when I was 24, working night shifts at St. Mary's Hospital in Indianapolis. He was a paramedic, charming in that tired, messy way guys in uniforms always are. He brought in patients, cracked bad jokes to keep me awake, and would sometimes sneak me coffee when he saw me dragging at 3 a.m. I fell for him fast. He wasn't the most ambitious man, but he made me laugh, and he always said he loved how real I was. We moved in together within a year. Marriage followed 18 months later. I thought we were building something steady. We started trying for a baby 2 years in. It wasn't easy. I had 2 early miscarriages before we finally made it to the second trimester. We picked the name Eli during one of our nightly walks. He said it felt strong but gentle, and I remember how proud he was. He talked to my belly every night, telling stories, humming, promising the world. Then, one morning, I woke up bleeding. By the time we got to the hospital, there was no heartbeat. The silence in that room broke something in both of us, or at least that's what I thought. But grief doesn't always bind people together. Sometimes it exposes who they really are. He started staying late at work. Said he needed space. I told myself that was fair, everyone grieves differently. But when he stopped touching me altogether, I started noticing things. His phone face down. His sudden need to shower the minute he came home. A new cologne I didn't buy him. I found her name by accident, Kelsey, a new EMT, young, bright, eager. Her Instagram was full of gym selfies and grindset quotes. At first, I told myself I was paranoid. Then one night, Luke left his iPad on the couch while he was showering. I wasn't looking for anything. It just lit up. A message from her. "I wish you didn't have to go home tonight. Eli misses you." I remember just staring at the screen, not understanding. Eli, we didn't even have the baby anymore. My brain refused to process it. When he came out, towel around his waist, I asked, "Who's Kelsey?" He froze. It was just half a second, but I saw the truth before he even spoke. Then he smiled that same tired, fake smile and said, "She's just a coworker, don't start." We fought that night. Hard. He said I was suffocating him. That I'd changed since the miscarriage, that I was too controlling. The next day, he packed a bag and said he needed time to think. I thought that meant a week, maybe 2. It turned into 3 months. He barely answered my texts. And when he finally came back home, something was gone from his eyes. We tried to patch things up, but it was all surface level, no apologies, no warmth. He stopped touching the ultrasound photo on the fridge. He stopped saying Eli's name. And then, one morning, I woke up to see her tagged post. Kelsey and Luke adopted a puppy, the same week he'd told me he wasn't ready to try for another baby. That was how I found out where he'd really been those 3 months, and what he'd been doing. But what came after that Instagram post was worse. Much worse. Because that's when I found out why he'd told her I was too controlling. And what she believed he meant by that. After that Instagram post, something in me went quiet. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just started collecting things. Screenshots, receipts, dates. I started with her Instagram. Every caption, every tag, every little hint of his presence, the angle of his truck in the background, his reflection in her sunglasses, even his damn watch on her nightstand. She was sloppy and he was arrogant. The perfect combination for getting caught. At first, I just wanted proof, something to shove in his face and make him admit it. But the more I saw, the more I realized I didn't need his confession. I needed a plan. See, Kelsey wasn't just a random fling. She was new at the ambulance company, still under probation, and from what I could tell, trying hard to make everyone like her. Her parents were big church people, old money, small-town reputation. The kind of folks who brag about their daughter being a hero, first responder. I could already imagine how they'd feel if they knew she was screwing a married man who just lost a baby. The first real spark of rage came when I saw a picture of the puppy again a few days later. Same golden retriever, same collar. And the caption this time read, "Our sweet boy Eli learning to fetch with Daddy Blue Heart," she'd tagged him. Tagged him, my husband. That was when I realized it wasn't an accident. They knew what they were doing. Naming the dog after our baby wasn't some coincidence or twisted inside joke. It was a message, a way for them to rewrite our story and make me the ghost. And when I confronted him that night, he didn't even deny it. He smirked, leaned back on the couch and said, "You're acting crazy again. Maybe if you weren't so controlling, I'd still want to be home." That word again. Controlling. I asked what exactly he meant by that, and he laughed like it was obvious. "You had a meltdown over a dog's name," he said. "You track everything I do, you look through my stuff, you even stalk Kelsey online. What would you call that?" I wanted to hit him. Instead, I walked away. Because I realized something, he wasn't trying to argue. He was trying to make me look unstable. He was rewriting me into the villain of his story. I started digging deeper. I found text messages he deleted from his phone but forgot to erase from his cloud backup. One of them from Kelsey stopped me cold. "She really wouldn't let you pick the baby's name. That's messed up." And his reply, "Yeah. She controls everything. At least you let me have Eli this time." That line, "this time," it hit me that he'd told her some twisted version of the truth, that I was the reason we lost the baby. That I was obsessed with control, that I smothered him, that I didn't let him be a father. He'd turned our grief into a weapon. And the more I read, the clearer it became that this wasn't just cheating. It was character assassination. He'd been laying the groundwork for months, making me sound unhinged so when he finally left, she'd believe I was the problem. And she did. She'd been calling me the ex in her posts, even though we were still married. She thought she was the savior, the woman who freed him from a controlling, grieving wife. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I found the video. The one he didn't know had been automatically backed up from his phone to our shared drive. The one where he was in her apartment, holding that damn puppy, saying, "You're my real Eli. The other one just wasn't meant to be." That's the moment everything snapped. I knew then this wasn't about grief anymore. It was about cruelty. And I was done being the quiet, broken wife. It was time for them both to learn what control really looked like. The night I found that video, I didn't sleep. I just sat in bed, replaying it over and over until the sound of his voice stopped meaning anything. That hollow laugh, that little shake of his head when the puppy licked his face. "You're my real Eli, the other one just wasn't meant to be." By morning, something inside me had hardened. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was calculating. I logged into our shared bank account first. He'd set up automatic transfers, small ones, every Friday. $200 here, $300 there. At first, I thought maybe it was just gas money or takeout. Then I saw the memo line on one of the transfers. For Kay he'd been sending her money. Not just small amounts either. Over the past 6 months, he'd sent her nearly $4,800. That alone was enough to make me want to burn it all down. But what made my blood run cold was where the money came from. He'd pulled it from the savings account we opened after the miscarriage, the one labeled Eli Fund. It was supposed to be for the next try, for IVF, for the hope of another chance. He'd used our baby's fund to bankroll his affair. That's when I realized how deep his betrayal really went. This wasn't a fling. He was building a new life using the ashes of ours. I called the bank and had the rest of the savings transferred into a private account under my name. He wouldn't notice immediately. He never checked statements. He just assumed I handled it. Then I started making copies of everything: statements, screenshots, emails. But the real twist didn't come from what I found in the finances. It came 2 days later, when I went to drop off some papers at his job. It wasn't planned. I'd been on autopilot, thinking about whether to confront him at work, maybe embarrass him a little. But when I pulled into the ambulance bay, I saw his car parked right beside hers. And on the passenger seat, visible through the window, was a folded ultrasound photo. My stomach dropped. I shouldn't have, but I did. I waited. I sat in my car and watched the entrance until they came out, laughing, touching, too close to be just coworkers. Then I saw her hand go to her stomach. That soft, protective gesture every pregnant woman does without even thinking. And when she turned, I saw the look in his eyes, that same glow he used to have when we were expecting. That was when it hit me. The ultrasound wasn't a memory. It was new. Kelsey was pregnant with his child. And the part that destroyed me wasn't even that he'd moved on so fast. It was that he was giving her everything he'd taken from me, the excitement, the tenderness, the future I'd bled for. But he wasn't doing it out of love. No. I could see it in the way he watched her, the way he guided her with his hand at her back. The same way you'd guide someone fragile, naive, easy to manipulate. Because now I understood. He wasn't just replacing me, he was rewriting me. He wanted a second chance to get it right. And she was his clean slate. I drove home numb, hands shaking on the steering wheel, the ultrasound burned into my mind. That night, I finally opened the folder of evidence I'd been building and stared at it until an idea began to take shape. A plan that would take everything from him: his reputation, his comfort, his little fantasy of a fresh start. But first, I needed to be sure of one thing. If he'd told her the same lies about me, about how I controlled him, how I ruined him, I could use that. I needed to see how deep the manipulation went. So I did something I swore I'd never do. I messaged Kelsey directly. It took me 3 hours to write that message. I started and deleted it at least 10 times before I finally hit send. I didn't want to sound angry or jealous. I wanted to sound broken, harmless, the version of me Luke had probably painted for her. I typed, "Hey Kelsey, I'm not trying to start anything. I just want to clear up a few things about Luke. I know you're pregnant, and I wish you a healthy pregnancy. I just think you deserve to know the full story before you decide what kind of man you're building your life with." I sent it, expecting silence or maybe some defensive reply. Instead, 10 minutes later, she typed back, "Wow, I didn't think you'd actually reach out. Look, I'm sorry things happened the way they did, but Luke told me you two were basically done before we got together. I didn't want to hurt you." There it was. The line every other woman tells herself to make betrayal feel cleaner. I didn't argue, I just said, "That's not what the timeline shows. Want me to send you proof?" She didn't respond right away. Then 3 dots. Then, "Sure." I sent everything. The transfer receipts from the Eli Fund. Screenshots of his texts to me begging for another chance while he was in her bed. A photo of the puppy's tag with Eli engraved next to his name on the adoption paperwork. She opened them one by one. I could tell because the read receipts lit up in order. After 5 minutes, she sent one message back. "He told me you wouldn't let him name your baby Eli. He said you didn't even want kids again." I stared at the screen. My throat tightened. "That's not true," I typed. "Eli was the name we chose together. He begged for it. And that baby was wanted more than anything." No reply, for hours. Then, at 1:37 a.m., another message came through. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I'm sorry." I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because the silence that followed was enough. She was realizing who he really was and what he'd turned her into. That's when I started the next phase of my plan. First, I gathered every piece of evidence: the video of him calling the puppy his real Eli, the texts, the bank statements, the ultrasound photo he'd left in her car. I organized everything into folders, one digital, one printed. Then I made a list of recipients: her parents, the church pillars who thought their daughter was pure, his supervisor who didn't tolerate interoffice relationships, his mom who still sent me Christmas cards, thinking we were working it out, the homeowners association group chat, the one he used to brag in about his hero wife, and last, a small, private folder labeled to Kelsey. That one was special. It contained screenshots of his messages with another woman. Because yes, while he was playing house with her, he was also messaging someone else, a woman named Carly, a nurse from his old unit. The messages were disgusting. "You'd look good holding a baby. You're way more chill than Kelsey. Don't worry, she's hormonal right now. I'll be free soon." He was already lining up his next replacement. When I saw those, I stopped feeling even a flicker of sympathy for Kelsey. She wasn't innocent, but she was next on his list to ruin. So I decided to time everything perfectly. Kelsey had her first prenatal appointment coming up. She'd posted about it, of course. I decided that would be the day. I'd send everything while she was sitting in that waiting room, holding her belly, thinking about her fresh start. I didn't want her hurt. I wanted her awake, but the final blow wasn't for her. It was for him, because I'd found something in his cloud storage he didn't even know existed, a folder labeled work stuff. Inside were private incident reports from his job. One of them documented a mistake he'd made: falsified vitals on a patient who later died. The report had been quietly filed away, but if it got out, he'd lose his certification. I knew exactly who to send that to. So I waited, and the morning of her appointment, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the folders queued up, my finger hovering over send all. Then my phone buzzed, a new message from Kelsey. "Can we talk in person? It's important." Something about that made me pause, because her tone was different, calm, deliberate. And when I agreed to meet her that afternoon, I had no idea that what she'd tell me next would turn the entire story upside down. When I pulled into the cafe parking lot that afternoon, I half expected her not to show. But there she was, sitting by the window, both hands wrapped around a cup of tea, face pale and swollen like she'd been crying for hours. She looked up when I walked in, and for a second, neither of us said anything. It was strange seeing her in person after months of stalking her life online. She didn't look like the villain I'd built in my head. She looked scared. I sat down across from her. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly. I just nodded. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope, one of those generic white ones from a clinic. She slid it across the table toward me. "I got my results back this morning," she said. "I wasn't at the OBS office for a checkup, it was for this." I frowned. "Results?" She took a shaky breath. "I'm not pregnant." The room felt suddenly smaller. "What?" She pushed the envelope closer. Inside was a negative test result from a hospital lab. "I thought I was," she said. "He told everyone I was. He even said we were picking baby names." Her eyes filled with tears. "But I had this weird feeling. The symptoms weren't adding up, so I went alone today to get checked. Turns out it was all in my head. Or maybe he made me believe it." I stared at her, confused. "Why would he?" She cut me off, her voice cracking. "Because he said he wanted a family again. But then last week he started acting weird, distant. I asked if he was okay, and he told me not to get crazy like you. He said he was tired of women who used babies to control him." That word again. Control. Kelsey looked at me with a kind of broken realization. "He told me you faked your pregnancy, that you pretended to miscarry just to manipulate him into staying." For a second, I couldn't speak. I just sat there, staring at her. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was too insane not to. "He said what?" She nodded, eyes red. "He told me you lied about everything, that the baby wasn't his, that you used the miscarriage for sympathy. That's why he said you were controlling, because you tried to trap him." My stomach turned, the audacity of it. He hadn't just betrayed me, he'd rewritten history, erased a dead child, and painted me as some deranged liar. And she had believed it. Because he was charming and confident, and because it's easier to believe you're the savior than the side chick. But the part that truly twisted the knife came next. She whispered, "He made me name the dog Eli. I didn't even know it was your baby's name. He said it was the name he'd wanted to give his real kid, not the fake one you pretended to lose. The words hit like a punch. My vision blurred. I didn't even realize I was crying until I saw the napkin in my hand was soaked. She reached across the table. I swear I didn't know. When you sent me those screenshots, I confronted him last night. He laughed. Said I was lucky I'd find out now because he didn't want to raise another liar's kid. He said I should just get rid of it and find someone stable. I was quiet for a long time. Then I asked, "So what now?" She took a deep breath, her eyes hardening. "Now we make sure he never does this to anyone else." And that's when she showed me something I hadn't expected, a recording on her phone. It was from the night before. Him pacing around her apartment, drunk, ranting. His voice was slurred but clear enough. "You think you're special. You think you're better than her. You're all the same, clingy, emotional. You beg for babies and then blame me when things go wrong. You think Eli was real? She faked it. I saw the hospital papers. All she wanted was to trap me." Then he laughed, that same cruel, sharp sound I knew too well. "I named the dog Eli because that's all he ever was, a pet project, something to control." Kelsey stopped the recording and looked at me. "He doesn't know I have it, but I'm done protecting him. You want revenge." So do I. For the first time in months, I felt something close to relief, not peace, but clarity. He had told both of us the same lie in different words. He'd used grief, love, and hope as weapons, and now we had proof. I slid my phone toward her, my folders open and ready. "Then let's make him pay," I said. And right there, in that coffee shop, we planned it, the exact way we'd strip his life bare and make sure he couldn't hurt another person again. But neither of us knew then what we'd uncover next, the real reason he'd done all of this. And when I found out, it was worse than anything I'd imagined. I thought I knew every ugly corner of him. I was wrong. The morning I found the incident report in his cloud, the one that said falsified vitals, and quietly mentioned a patient who later died, I felt sick. That file had been tucked away like a dirty secret, the kind of thing you hide under the floorboards and hope the house doesn't burn down. I'd stared at it for hours, imagining the late-night meetings, the whispered compromises, the way he must have talked himself into it. I thought the worst was a man who'd cheated and named a puppy after my dead baby to spite me. I thought his cruelty came from cowardice and cowardice only. But the truth was cleaner, colder, and worse. He hadn't cheated because he fell out of love. He hadn't named the dog Eli because he felt untethered and childish. He built that whole story, the controlling wife, the lonely paramedic who deserved saving, the fake pregnancy for Kelsey, as a preemptive smokescreen. He was covering his tracks. For months, he'd been doctoring run sheets and altering vitals on calls. He'd padded overtime, hidden missing supplies, and quietly collected small cash payments from families wanting expedited paperwork. He was careful, not stupid, which made him terrifying. When the patient died after an incorrectly documented transfer, a file was opened and quickly buried in the company's internal system. Someone high up wanted it silent. Someone who knew how easy it was to destroy a story by destroying the storyteller. That file in his cloud wasn't an accident. It was insurance. If I ever started asking questions, if I ever dug into the Eli Fund or the withdrawals, he needed a narrative that would discredit me. He needed me to be the crazy, controlling woman everyone would shake their head about. He needed Kelsey to be the angel savior who rescued him from me. He needed the entire social script rewritten so that if anyone came sniffing around the ambulance bay or the bank, they'd hear a sob story. A grieving wife who can't let go, a bitter ex trying to claw back sympathy. That's why he wove the lies about me faking the miscarriage. That's why he fed Kelsey the lie about my real motive. He knew the exact seams of people's sympathies. How pastors and supervisors default to the man who looks stable and apologetic. How small-town parents will protect the shiny newcomer over the tired wife who cries at night. He used my grief as a decoy. He used our baby's name as a trophy to rub salt in the wound. And he siphoned the savings we'd set aside for the next try to pay Kelsey, not because he loved her, but because dependency keeps people close, and close people keep secrets. When Kelsey told me, she'd confronted him after I sent the screenshots, and he'd laughed in her face about my fake pregnancy, I realized how deep the strategic cruelty went. He wasn't trying to win her heart. He was trying to anchor her to him, financially and emotionally, so she'd be less likely to blow his cover when the day came that someone at work asked the right question. He wanted witnesses who'd defend him, not accuse him. And there was the most chilling part. He'd rehearsed this before. The controlling ex-wife was a template he'd used on another woman years ago, someone who left before things escalated. I found a half-erased message on his cloud from a name I hadn't seen. The gist was the same. Quiet her, isolate her, make her look unstable if she threatens to expose you. He'd done it before and gotten away with it. So when I saw the recorded rant on Kelsey's phone where he said, "She faked it," I didn't hear drunken bravado. I heard a plan. I heard a man so practiced at gaslighting that he could thread tragedy into his own shield. Understanding that changed everything. This wasn't a betrayal born of lust or cowardly selfishness. It was a calculation aimed at preserving his livelihood and his freedom from the consequences of negligence that cost a life. He'd gambled with other people's trust and safety for money and convenience, and when that gamble began to unravel, he chose to manufacture a narrative that would bury the truth under public disbelief. That's why I couldn't stop at exposing a cheating husband or humiliating him in front of his church. He'd weaponized a whole future, my reputation, any leverage I might have, the possibility of exposing the falsified report, and he would use every person he could manipulate to blunt the blow. So I changed the edges of my plan. Humiliation was too small. I needed repercussions that reached into the one place he'd tried to protect the most: his job, his license, the quiet, respectable life he'd built on top of lies. I started connecting dots the way I never had time for when I was busy trying to hold a marriage together. Who had access to company HR? Which supervisors had been suspicious but silenced? Which families had been handed excuses when they asked for answers about the call that led to that patient's death? I made a list, and I found a pattern. Small favors, overlooked mistakes, people who saw him as a good guy who made a stupid error. It became clear what I had to do. Not because I wanted to ruin him for the pleasure of it, though maybe I did want that, but because letting this stand meant someone else would eventually die or lose everything, while he continued playing the hero. I thought of the ultrasound he'd left in her car, the puppy with the tag that said Eli, the transfer memos from the Eli Fund, every sick, clever breadcrumb he'd left while he was engineering his escape hatch. And I realized this. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting to make sure the next family he failed didn't get buried under his lies. I closed my laptop, pressed my palms to my eyes, and for the first time in months, felt a clarity so cold it steadied my hands. I knew what I had to send first. When I finally hit send, it felt like dropping a match into a dry forest. I sent the packet to the people who would hurt him the most in ways he had tried to protect. The ambulance company's HR director, the paramedic licensing board for our state, the local investigative reporter who'd once written a piece about neglect in emergency services, and the patient's family, the one whose son had died after that botched transfer. To each I attached different pieces of the puzzle, so no single person could ignore the whole picture without being obvious. To HR, I sent the incident report and the run sheet manipulations. To the licensing board, I sent the files showing the falsified vitals and an organized timeline of money transfers from our Eli Fund to a K on his memos. To the reporter, I sent the video of him laughing with the puppy, the recording of his drunk rant, and the bank statements. To the family, I sent the redacted run reports and an apology letter I wrote, but never sent to anyone. Raw, honest, and the kind that makes people look at their own government-sanctioned emergency responders with new suspicion. I expected denial. I expected him to call me crazy and the whole thing to simmer into the kind of private hell that leaves you with scars but no justice. What I didn't expect was how quickly the company moved once the right people had all the right pieces. HR put him on immediate leave the same day. The licensing board opened an inquiry within 48 hours. The reporter called me for an interview. By the next week, a local investigative piece ran with our patient's story and his quote about trusting the people who were supposed to save him. The comments section filled with the kind of righteous fury that stays online but sometimes reaches the boardroom. People called. 2 families who had thought they were alone in their suspicions reached out and said quietly that they'd also had odd experiences. The pile of odd became a pattern overnight, And then Luke made his move. He tried the classic thing men like him do when their illusions of decency are collapsing. He tried to gaslight in public. He posted a tearful video on a weekend with soft music in the background, telling the world he'd been set up, that his marriage had been toxic, that I was a resentful, controlling woman trying to ruin his career out of spite. He even claimed I'd stolen money, a narrative so absurd I almost laughed. He said he would sue. That was the first big mistake he made. He underestimated archival backups, clever email folders mixed with timestamps, and the fact that I had been methodical and boringly thorough. He also underestimated how many people had already seen his own cloud. The one he forgot had auto-synced. Discovery in his lawsuit brought out everything. His lawyer's polite letters were the sound of his world unspooling. The lawyer who once told him he had a good shot at keeping his job now stopped returning his calls. The licensing board froze his certification pending investigation. The ambulance company started contacting families. One of the families demanded an independent review. The review found procedural violations. The little favors and quiet cover-ups couldn't hold up when someone else read the run sheets with forensic eyes. The second twist, the one that felt almost cinematic in how quickly it hammered the final nail, came from the women he'd thought of as disposable. Carly, the nurse he'd messaged in secrecy, and Kelsey, who had once been so naive I'd almost pity her, both made the choice I'm still not sure I expected. They decided they were done being part of his shield. Carly sent her message history and screenshots of their conversations to the investigator and to me. She said, in a message that made me cry then and still makes me angry now, "I didn't know how deep it was until your evidence. I don't want his habits to ruin more people." Kelsey testified about his lies and the puppy and the ultrasound he planted in her car. Seeing them, men who'd once been his allies at work, the ones who'd laughed off rumors, started whispering on different terms. When the licensing board revoked his certification, that was the cleanest justice I'd seen in a long time. It didn't undo anything, of course. It didn't give me back the night that ended in an ultrasound machine going silent, or the months I spent staring at a nursery that would never be used. But it took him out of the role he'd leaned on, the respectable, heroic paramedic who could charm a room and silence a complaint. The man who once told me, "This one listens better anyway," lost the one badge he'd kept polished. Public trust. In the weeks that followed, there were small, sharp victories and quiet moments of unbearable reckoning. His mother called, furious. His father avoided me at holiday parties. Kelsey and I met once more, in a park this time, and we didn't plot or scheme. We compared notes on things that still hurt. We laughed, hoarse and ugly, about the puppy's unfortunate name tag. We decided to go to therapy sessions together, not because we needed to save him, but because we deserved to be unmade in safety and rebuilt on our own terms. I closed our shared accounts and moved what little I could without drama. I sold the house that smelled like his cologne and cardboard boxes of pastel baby clothes I'd never opened. I didn't burn photos. I kept 3 and folded them into a box with a letter for the child we would have had. I don't know why I kept that letter. Maybe because grief is stubborn and slow, and closure is not a dramatic scene you stage for an audience. It's a series of small, private acts. In the end, the legal record remained. He didn't end up in prison. That would have required a criminal conviction I couldn't pull off without being a different person. But his professional life, the one he'd protected and built on top of petty cruelties and larger crimes, was finished. The patient's family got answers and a sense that their loss mattered. The local paper printed follow-ups. HR rewrote policies. They started required audits. In tiny, bureaucratic ways, people did better because of the mess he left behind. My revenge was never about spectacle. I wanted consequence and prevention. I wanted the man who had made a mocking shrine out of my child's name to feel the loss of the thing he valued most. Reputation, the slow kind that people talk about at church fundraisers. He lost a job, a license, and the easy smiles that used to open doors. He lost the power to make excuses with a wink. Most of all, I got myself back. I started volunteering with a local support group for parents who'd lost babies, and I taught a class on honest paperwork and patient rights for a community college nursing program. Because if his falsified vitals taught me anything, it's that lies in a ledger become lives in danger. Doing that work made me feel useful again, and not in a woman who was hurt way, in a survivor way. The last time I saw Luke, he was in a grocery store aisle, thinner, looking like a man who'd been traded his uniform for a plain life. He glanced at me and looked away. I felt a brief stab of something old, longing, perhaps, or a memory of a man who once promised the world, and then it was gone. He gave our baby's name to a dog to spite me. I gave my life back to myself to honor what we lost. Different kinds of revenge, different kinds of victory. I keep one small thing from all of it, the tag from the puppy, bent and dulled, tucked into the box with that unsent letter. I don't want the name gone. I want it carried carefully. He thought Eli would be something to brand his new life. Instead, Eli became the reason I burned the bridge he was standing on and walked away. And walking away, I learned how to be loud enough for myself again. Closure didn't come all at once. It came in mail from strangers thanking me for making sure their neighbor didn't die like theirs. In the quiet afternoons when I could say the name out loud and not fall apart. And in a stupid, small moment when a shelter dog that needed a home followed me home from the pound with a wag so enormous I had no choice but to smile. I didn't name him Eli. I named him Archer because after all of that, I wanted a name that pointed forward.